Hello class. Today we're going to take the distributive property one step farther. We're going to solve equations that involve the distributive property. So before we actually get into solving the equations, let's see what we remember about the distributive property from Monday's lesson. So here it says simplify each expression. So what I'd like for you to do, I want you to pause the video and I want you to answer the first two for me. We'll come back and look at the third one together. So pause the video and simplify the first two expressions. Okay, so let's find out how you did. So the first one, all we're really having to do here is combine like terms. There aren't any parentheses that actually involve the distributive property. Even though this parenthesis is there, all it's doing is separating this minus and this negative. Okay, so what I've taught you to do is if you see minuses, to fix those. Now, you don't have to do that, but it is good practice, and it helps us understand the integer rules a little bit better. So what I would do is I'd come in here and I'd change this first minus to a plus and the 5m to a negative, and then I would change this next one the same exact way. And then I start combining things that are alike. So I see that I've got a 3m and a negative 5m that I can put together. So I would put those together to make a negative 2m. Plus, so my m's are now gone, and all I have left are the 4 and the 8. So I add those together, and I end up with 12. So the simplification of this expression is negative 2m plus 12. Now in the second example, we do have to use the distributive property because it does have parentheses. Okay, so the first thing I would do is I'm going to change this subtraction to addition next to its opposite. And now the distributive property says that we're going to take this 4 and we're going to pass it out to each member of the element of parentheses, because that's what the distributive property is. I call it the pass out property because we're just passing that 4 out through multiplication to each member of the parentheses. So I would do 4 times 2g to give me 8g plus 4 times negative 8 to give me negative 32. Now another way we could write that would be 8g plus, 8g, not plus a negative, but just minus 32, and that would mean the same thing. Okay, so that's how you simplify those first two. Now let's look at this third one. This third one's a little bit tougher because it's got several opportunities for using the distributive property. Now, the first distributive property I'm going to use is on this particular expression right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the 3 bracket 4n plus, and I'm going to distribute that 2 to everything inside that parenthesis. So 2 to the 3m is going to make a 6m, plus the 2 to the 4n is going to make an 8n, and then my minus 6m just comes along for the ride. Now what I'm going to do there is I'm going to change that subtraction to addition and the negative and the 6 to a negative m. Now, one of the things that we can do here is we could combine our like terms and then distribute the 3, or I could distribute the 3 to each piece and then combine the like terms. In this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and combine the like terms together first, and then I'll distribute the 3. So I know I can take this 4n and this 8n and put those together to make 12n. Plus, and then I take the 6m and the negative 6m. Oh, and what are they? They are opposites, so they're just going to cancel each other out. Okay, so basically I have 3 times 12n because my 6m's actually cancel, and we just end up with 36n for the simplification of that expression. And that could happen, okay? But that 36n is a lot more simple than that expression right there. So that's what we're doing with the distributive property today. Okay, so we're going to take it one step further. We're going to solve equations that involve the distributive property. So let's just kind of revisit this idea of solving an equation. If we remember correctly, there are a few steps that we have to follow. Step number 1, get the letters together on one side. Step number 2, get the numbers together on the other side. And then the last step is to solve. Okay, so let's see if we can do that. Now again, when we solved these equations the last time, okay, I told you that you could start using some shortcuts. Okay, so that's what we're going to utilize in this particular problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this minus to a plus and next to its opposite. And then I want to move this 7x over to be with the 3x because I like my x's to be on the left. So I've got a positive 7x. So to get rid of that, I'm going to do a negative 7x. And if I do that on one side, I'm going to do that on the other side as well. So 3x and negative 7x will give me a negative 4x plus 4 equals. Then my 7's go away, and I'm left with a negative 12. So now I need to move the 4 over to be with a negative 12. So I have a plus 4, so I'm going to do a minus 4 and a minus 4. And again, that's the same thing as a negative 4. So I end up with, on the left-hand side, negative 4x is equal to, and then negative 12 and negative 4 will give me a negative 16. And then we divide both sides by negative 4, and you end up with x is equal to positive 4. So that's the steps that we use in order to solve equations. So the ones that we're going to look at today are going to be a little bit tougher because they're going to be one step in front of that. That is to use the distributive property. Okay, so let's kind of review that one more time. So the distributive property, if you remember correctly, what it says is that I can add first, then multiply, or I can multiply first, then add. Okay, so if you remember correctly, we had some examples here. And here was one example where we had just regular straight numbers. We had the 3 and the 4 that I could put together. So 3 plus 4 gives us the 7. And then we multiply that 7 by the 2 on the outside, which gives us 14. Now, what if we actually use the distributive property? Is there another way we could do this? Well, I could pass the 2 out to the 3, and I could pass the 2 out to the 4. Multiply those two together. 2 times 3 gives you 6. 2 times 4 gives you 8. And if we add the 6 and 8 together, we still get 14. Okay, so with the equations that we're going to have today, they're going to have the distributive property in them. So the first thing that we have to do before we can solve this problem is actually take care of the parentheses. So that means I need to pass this 2 out to each member of the parentheses. So we get 2 times 3x, which is 6x, plus 2 times 4, which is 8, and that's going to be equal to 23. And now once we use the distributive property, it becomes just a regular equation. So now I need to solve for x. So I first have to get rid of the 8, so I subtract 8 from both sides, and you end up with 6x is equal to, and then 23 take away 8 gives us 15. Then to get rid of the multiply by 6, I do a divide by 6, and we end up with x is equal to, and if you do 15 divided by 6, you end up with 2.5. Okay, now you could do that longhand or using your calculator. 6 goes into 15 2 times. You get 3 left over, so we've got 3 over 6, and then 3 over 6 simplifies to 1/2, which is the same thing as 2.5. So in this one, let's see if you can do this one on your own. Okay, so in this one, you're going to use the distributive property here, and then you'll do the distributive property here, and then once the parentheses are gone, you'll solve the equation. So pause the video, and let's see if you can answer that question. Okay, so let's see how you did. Well, the first thing I would do in this problem is I'm going to change that subtraction to addition next to its opposite. Now I'm going to pass out this negative 4 to each element inside the parentheses. So negative 4 times 2x will give me negative 8x, plus negative 4 times negative 10 gives me positive 40, equals, and now I pass out the 2. 2 to the x gives me 2x, plus 2 to the 5 gives me 10. Now, this problem looks just like one of those questions we did earlier. Get your letters on one side, get your numbers on the other, and solve. That's all we got to do. So let's see if we can do that. Oh, I erased my 2 there. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to move this 2x over to be with the 8x. So I'm going to subtract 2x from this side, subtract 2x over here. So negative 8x and negative 2x will make negative 10x. Plus 40 equals, my 2x's cancel out, and I'm left with 10. So now, I need to move this 40 over to be with the 10. So I subtract 40 from this side, subtract 40 from the other. I end up with negative 10x, because my 40's go away, is equal to negative 30. And now I have a multiply by negative 10. So I divide by negative 10. And I end up with x is equal to 3. Now you could take that 3 and plug it back into each of these x's at the top and do the math to see if it works. But I'm going to take it for granted that I did it correctly. Okay? And that's all there is. That's all there is to solving equations with distributive property. However, sometimes, though, we might end up with an application problem. Oh, goodness. Here we have a rectangle. It says the perimeter is 240 m, which stands for meters. Okay, and we know that the sides are W, and the bottoms, the top and bottom, are W plus 20. So how would we solve this one? Oh, my goodness. Well, we know perimeter is the distance all the way around the shape. So you could do something like this. I know that this side is W, so that makes this side W. I know that this bottom is W plus 20, so that means my top is also W plus 20. So we could write an equation for this. Okay, 2W plus 2W plus 20 equals, I'm running out of room there, 240. So we know that perimeter is the distance all the way around. So I've got a W and a W. That's where my 2W came from. And I've got a W plus 20 and a W plus 20. So I've got two of those. And that's where the distributive property comes into play on this problem. So we end up with 2W. Oh, and I wrote a 3. We end up with 2W plus, and now we're going to distribute this 2. So we end up with 2W again plus, and then 2 times 20 gives you 40. And all that's going to be equal to 240. So now I can combine like terms. The 2W and the 2W will make 4W plus 40 equals 240. Now I have just a regular equation. So I move the 40 over to be with sorry about that. I move the 40 over to be with the 240. So I subtract 40, subtract 40. I end up with 4W is equal to 200, divide by 4, and W is equal to 50, which is what I wanted to know. Now, once I know that that's 50, I could then find this side, which would be 50, in this case 50 meters. And I could also find this side right here by plugging in 50, and I find out that this is equal to 70 meters. And that's an application of solving equations with the distributive property. Now we got one more thing to look at before we finish our lesson today. If you remember correctly, there were some strange things that could happen when I had variables on both sides of the equation. And you might encounter this on your assignment today, so that's why, or the assignment tomorrow, sorry. So that's why I'm bringing this up. So let's take a look at these two questions right here. So in this one, you see that there's a distributive here at the beginning. So I'm going to pass this 2 out to both of those. So I'll end up with 2x plus 8 is equal to 2x plus 10. So what I'm hoping that you remember is what happens when I have the same exact variable on both sides, 2x and 2x. So if I were to subtract 2x from this side and from this side, what would I have left? My 2x's cancel out, and I'm left with 8 is equal to 10. And is that a true statement? No, it's not. So what is it that we write? Well, hopefully what you remember is you put a slash through the equal sign, and you say no solution. Okay, so let's take a look at this last one here then. Okay, so first off, I see both of them have minuses, so I'm going to fix that. And then I'm going to pass out the numbers in the front. So I'm going to pass this 3 out to the 2x to get 6x, plus 3 to the negative 4 to get negative 12, equals. And then do the same thing on the other side. 2 to the 3x gives me 6x, plus 2 to the negative 6 gives me negative, I don't know where the 10 came from, negative 12. Now, what do you see on this side? Well, on this one, if I were to subtract the 6x's away, I'm going to end up with negative 12 is equal to negative 12. Now, is that a true statement? Yes, it is. So what do we say in that situation? Well, in this particular one, what you'd say is all real numbers, because every number will work in that instance. So that's what we're talking about by solving equations with the distributive property. It's really not any more difficult or any more different than just solving regular equations. You just got to get rid of the parentheses first before you can do anything. So what we're going to do for our assignment over the next 2 days is I want you to answer the evens on this assignment. The evens, okay? So that's going to be 2 through 14, and then 16 and 18. Okay, so that's what we're basically doing. Okay, so you'll solve them the same way. Now, you need to remember something. Okay, if you just give me answers, I will count your problem wrong. I must see the work. And what I mean by work is this right here. If I don't see your work, your answer doesn't mean anything. Your work justifies what your answer is. So if you don't have anything to prove your answer, then your answer doesn't count. So, again, you're going to do the evens, 2 through 14, and then 16 and 18, and then turn those in. So until next time, I'll talk to you later.